Hello, History 131 students. Uh, having viewed your grades, it looks like most of you did extremely well on test one. Those who did not take the test or would like to retake it, I would announce sometime this week of scheduling reposting test one. So stay tuned, check your messages. Uh, Today is chapter 4. It's called Ancient China, during its antiquity. What do we want to know about this? China is the fourth of the original civilization. It too, the civilization was started alongside a river, the Yellow River. So just as in Mesopotamia, the civilization started alongside rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. In Egypt, it was the Nile River. In India, it was the Indus River. Now in China, it is the Yellow River. And China, as we know, is one of the most populous countries on earth. And this population was even large during the ancient time period. It shaped Asian culture. Now, the land in itself, the country is bound to the south by Vietnam, North Korea, and of course the Himalayas. Across the Himalayas, India, on the other side is China and Nepal and Tibet. But most of China is desert. And only 20, let's see, what's the percentage of only 12% of the land mass is arable. That means they have to export or import food to feed the 1.4 billion Chinese. It's a lot of Chinese in the world. In most major cities in the U.S. Around the world, there is a Chinatown. In most small towns in Alabama, America, there are restaurants that serve Chinese food. And of course, the staple food is rice. And who is the largest exporter of rice to China? The US of A. And what do we get in return? If you've been to Walmart, you get an idea. Shirts, hats, sneakers, computers, TVs, etc. So it's changing of goods. But that's not what this is all about. That's today. Chinese civilization organized in dynasties. The first dynasty was Shang, Shang. They had developed a writing similar to the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian, and the Hindus who had Sanskrit. The Chinese developed a writing style on oracle bones to predict the future. This writing style would be exported to the Vietnamese, the Japanese, the Koreans, and the rest of all of Thailand. The characters are very similar. The Qing was replaced by the Zhou dynasty, and they were feudalistic. But one of the things we want to remember about the Zhou, they developed an industry that's still in existence today, the silk industry. They cultivated the silkworm, which allowed them to form cocoon in the mulberry tree, and then they would weave the cocoon and turn it into silk. This is one of the most expensive fabric on earth today, and it's still in high demand. The Zhou also ushered in what we call the 100 School of Ancient Philosophy. Philosophy means wisdom. Now, please note, the Chinese and later the Greeks would deal with philosophy. They were not, like the Mesopotamians, the Hebrews, and the Egyptians, overly concerned with the afterlife. They was more concerned with life here on earth. So they developed in China, Eastern philosophy, in Greece, Western philosophy. We're going to talk more about that when we get to Greece. But the key leader of Chinese philosophy is a man named Confucius. And he came up with his publication in the Internet. He believed in trying to build a efficient bureaucracy to manage the government. Now he puts into things like yin and yang, opposite versus dark versus light, night versus day, woman versus men. You can't create anything without yin and yang. But the Confucius ideal philosophy was ended when the Zhao was overthrown and a new dynasty was started by Han Ti, the first emperor. And he adopted a philosophy called legalism. And legalism believed that people believed that only firm action by the state could bring about social order. So they instituted punishment, censorship, basically an authoritative form of government. But what I want to talk about is the Qin dynasty. In fact, China gets its name from the first emperor, Han Ti. He centralized everything from cart length to monetary currency to weights and measurements, and he expanded the boundaries of China. Now, he also started the building of the Great Wall, which runs about 5,000 miles from the Pacific Ocean inland across the northern boundary of China. The Great Wall was built to keep the Mongols out. That they were not successful because the Mongols would conquer the Chinese later. So the Qin was replaced by the Han dynasty. Oh, I also want to point out that the Qin, Han Ti wanted to live forever, so he created a replica of him living, creating terracotta soldiers' army. If you've seen the last Mummy movies, that's his tomb that was discovered. The Queens were replaced by the Hans. The Hans were replaced by, they were the last ancient culture. The Chinese, as we say, a dominant society that exists and survives even today. It is the most powerful and the most populous country in Asia. Next, it is first, India is second. They have 4 times the number of people in the US of A. And they are our #1 trading partner. Next week, we will move back to Europe and introduce you to the Greeks. And very little on test 2 will come from China. Most of your tests will be on Greece and Rome. Once we finish Greece and Rome, we will have test 2. Be blessed and keep watch on Blackboard for the announcement of new tests. See you next week.